Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Mind Your Business Business Bites. I am so excited about today. You are not going to want to miss this. So grab a friend, share this out. Let's get a conversation going because I have the best brander in the world. At least she is to me. And I have a lot of branding friends, so no disrespect there, but she has certainly helped me with my branding, not only on a personal side, but also with our church. And so I am so excited to introduce to you the founder of Small House, Susan Charlie.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have you. I know that branding is just one thing that you do. So can you just give us a quick overview of all that you're doing and we'll get started.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on, Holly. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. Hopefully, we engage in some really good conversation. My name is Susan Charlie. I'm the founder of Small House. It's Small House Productions, Small House Publishing, Small House Branding Suite, and also Small House Creative HQ. So with that, I started out in the production and we were doing stage plays and you know I love a period piece, so period pieces, children's musicals, all of that kind of stuff. And then, like the rest of the world, we had to pivot in 2020, and our pivot was to take one of the productions that we had done that was really successful and to translate that into a children's picture book, which also had just like huge success, Princess Nyla and the Journey to the Magic Window. And from there, I had people just reaching out to me like, I have a book. Could you publish my book? And I had no intention on publishing anybody's work but mine. And so we created our publishing company from there, and we've been working ever since. We needed a workspace, and we got our studio. It was just like it's somewhere for us to meet together to work. And as we started to like do the design in the studio and kind of create the vibe that we wanted, we had people like, I want to come to the studio, I want to do something, I want to book a brunch, a birthday, a photo shoot. And that kind of evolved into its own thing. So that's kind of how we had that gradual evolution since 2020. So it's been amazing. It's been a great ride.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think your book is outstanding.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful. I've seen all the back end stuff that you've done on social media and all the different pieces, which really I think led to the ultimate success of the book.
Thank you.
Because it was very present.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, like every time I looked, there were these beautiful pictures, and it really was truly, and I'm not just saying this because it's yours, right? It truly was branding in a way that it captured you. It captured your attention.
Mm-hmm.
It captured your feeds. Like it was like you posted enough, but not overwhelming. It was beautifully done. You got to see behind the scenes. So you felt like you were a part of the creation of it. Although, you know, I'm sitting in my house. So I know that today's discussion is about branding, right? So how do you manage those pieces? Like, what does that look like?
I think a huge part of branding really is your story. And it is your ability to tell your story kind of in real time. And that's the part that people sometimes will run away from, especially when we're thinking about how can we create content that supports our brand. And the easiest way to do that is just to document your journey as you're going along, showing people the behind the scenes, showing people your process, showing people the mess up, showing people the mistakes, and showing people, you know, the difficulty in being able to create something. I think that's what's important, and it helps to lend to the authenticity of what you're trying to create, because people, they go along on a journey with you, and that's branding, that's marketing, that's all of that, is telling a story, bringing people along the journey to where they get to the point that they're so invested that the sale becomes easy.
Right. And how does that because I know you've done the children's books. So your target audience is children, but really the parents are the ones that have to buy the book, right?
Hmm.
So how do you manage your targeted marketing like that? How do you work that into the brand?
So you have to know, one of the things that you have to ask yourself is, who is this for? Right. And that seems to be a question that stumps a lot of people, because everyone wants their thing to be for everybody. That's what people immediately say. I want everybody to like it. I want everybody to buy it. I want it to be for girls and boys and men and women and old people and young people. And that's an issue, right? Because trying to appeal to everyone will ensure that you don't appeal to anyone. And so I think really sitting down and saying, who does my product or service or brand, who is it serving? Um, where is it answering a question or a problem in a particular market? And that's who you need to be targeting. So for my book in particular, representation is one of the problems that is solving. Well, who is underrepresented? And then how can I market my project to that underrepresented market, which for me is Black women, right? Black mothers, Black girls, in that princess space where, everything princess tends to lean towards a certain company. And so we haven't seen representation like we've wanted to. So taking my product and saying, how can I market this? How can I brand it for an audience of people who feel underrepresented, so that it's solving that problem? And so I think being very specific, people don't like to be specific because they feel like they're leaving money on the table, or I don't want to leave anyone out. But at the end of the day, whatever you're doing, whatever product, whatever services, is not for everybody, but it is for somebody. And just you being able to understand who that somebody is going to save you time, is going to save you effort, is going to save you money. When you know exactly who your product is for.
Yeah. I think that's key, right? Like really, who is it for and why? And a lot of times when people I find working with aspiring entrepreneurs, they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, think about who you would like your ideal client to be. What are their characteristics? Where do they hang out? What do they like to do? And 9 times out of 10, once you drill down to that and you're then able to identify it, it just is natural. It's almost like who you then tend to draw
Absolutely.
because you're targeting them. But it is hard, especially for women,
Mm-hmm.
to niche down.
Oh, yes.
It's
It's
very
actually hard for everybody because, again, like I had a pastor one time that was writing a book about church growth. And I asked, who is your book for? Because a part of our publishing process is to really sit down and talk about who this is for, to really identify your audience, because who the product is for is going to inform a lot of other things, like how you write the book, like how you design the cover, like where you place the book in terms of sales. So who the book is for is just as important as what's in the book. And his answer to me was like, oh, well, I'm thinking, seasoned leaders who are looking to pivot, and people who are just coming to church. And I'm like, those are two completely completely different audiences. You
yeah.
cannot possibly be writing to
No.
those two groups of people, because the language that you're going to use is going to be different. The references that you'll probably use for someone who's a seasoned church leader versus someone who is just coming to the Lord is going to be different. And so you have to decide, out of these two groups that are polar opposite, which group you're going to be writing to, because that's going to inform the branding and that's going to inform the marketing. So definitely niching down to who your product, your services, or your brand is going to serve is absolutely one of the most important things you're going to do to have a successful brand.
Yeah, I think that is very difficult, especially for authors. Or let me not say that. It has been for me as an author, right? Because for me, I'm currently in the process of writing a book. I have one that I did business. For me, that was kind of a no brainer. It was very easy, right? The business side, I tend to know the niches.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're writing a book that is more on the Christian end, where you are telling your story,
Mm-hmm.
you then think, well, I want it to resonate with a certain group of individuals, but it's also bigger than that. And
Right.
so it makes it hard, right, to really niche that down. But you're right, until you identify that, then it's hard to figure out who you're really speaking to,
Mm-hmm. And
even
how
in
to
this
speak
writing.
to them. Because
Yes.
depending on who you're speaking to, that's going to determine how you speak to them. You're not going to, if your target is to mentor young adult women between the ages of, let's say, 19 and 25, you're not going to speak the same language and use the same references and even things like color palette for a group of women that's in their 40s. They have different needs, you know what I mean? And so the way that they relate to things is going to be different, and so the way to reach them is going to be different. So it's really, really important, as much as I know people hate to niche down, to really sit down and think about who your audience is for the branding side and for the marketing side. If we're watching television, you know, there are certain commercials that happen during the day. Those are targeted towards a particular audience of people who are home during the day. Sometimes, back in the day at least, it used to be women because we would be home. And so a lot of the commercials were targeted towards women because they know they're going to be home. What are some of the things we want to sell women during the day while they're home? Okay, so these are the commercials you'll see during the day, whereas in the evening time, you may see a shift in the things that are being marketed. It's the same thing when it comes onto your brand, is that knowing who you're standing in front of, knowing where they meet and when they meet and what time they're home and what time they're going to be watching TV or what time they're going to be on social media, or where does this particular age group meet? Are they on TikTok? Are they on Instagram? Are they on Facebook? Because every social media platform won't work for you. You got to know your audience. That is the point. You got to know your audience, and you have to try to know them as well as possible.
What if you have a particular group of people that typically are drawn to you, but you want to shift that a bit and maybe reach another demographic, whether it's age or ethnicity? How do you do that?
I think you have to ask yourself why they're drawn to you.
Okay.
Like, what are the things about me that draws this particular audience, or what is it about the way that I'm showing up? What is it about the way where I show up that this audience will tend to gather? I think asking yourself those questions will help you to then pivot. And again, where are the people that I want to reach? Where do they gather? How do they gather? What resonates with them? When you're able to answer those questions, and I think that that will help you to pivot to the audience that you want to meet.
That's good. That's good. So I hear a lot of people say, like, I want my brand, and I've said it too, right? I want my brand to be authentic because I think a lot of us have been in this season where we've seen a lot of fake stuff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we just want the real deal. We want people to be as authentic so we know we can trust you. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do you, when people say, I want to be authentic, what are some of their hangups? And how do you really, in branding, form authenticity?
Mm-hmm. I think with authenticity, one of the things that people use to gauge authenticity is consistency. And so, if you want your brand to be authentic, number one, you have to be authentic. So once you're being authentic to who you are, whatever that looks like, that is going to resonate to other people. If you're being fake, that's going to resonate. But if you're being your authentic self, that's what's going to resonate. But I think in authenticity, there is a level of consistency to where people know what to expect from you. And so, and that can be good or bad. Your consistency can be good or bad. People can be used to you showing up on social media and being negative every single day, right? And that can be authentically you.
Right. Right. That's
And you're consistent at it. And so, you know, you have to make that determination about how you're going to show up consistently, because that's going to help to determine your authenticity.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. So we do have a question that came in, and it's from Carrie Nelson. She's a photographer, and she says, "How do we share our story without sounding like we are just telling them or selling to them?"
I think what we talked about before, oh, and thank you so much for that question, Carrie. I think taking people on the journey with you, I think that's important. Showing even more than telling is also important. So if I can watch the journey as it unfolds, by the time we get to the sale point, I'm locked in. I'm ready. They're ready for the buy. So you don't even have to necessarily sell to people when you've taken them on the journey, when they become emotionally, because that's how we make decisions about the things that we're going to invest in or purchase, especially for women. A lot of our choices about that is emotion driven. And so when you're able to share your story authentically, when you're able to take people along the journey with you, um and let them see it, then you don't have to, tell so much, and you don't have to sell so much. So you're able to show it, and they're able to be so invested that they'll be asking you, how can I get this? Where can I get it from? Where can I sign up? How can I book your services? That's how you do that.
I love that. That's so good. That's so good because I think, particularly, I find this more with women, and I think it's because we're emotional, more emotional in some of the business pieces, right? We don't want to hard sell people because we
Mm-hmm.
don't like that approach.
No.
So, we want people, we don't want to come off as the icky salesman. We want to come off, that comes into that authenticity again, right? We
Mm-hmm.
want people just to love us because we're great people,
Mm-hmm.
and we take it all very personally. And so I think that's great that you're saying, like, take them through that back end piece. Let
Mm-hmm.
them see the good, the bad, the ugly, and then they see the humanity in it and what you really create.
And they get to see your commitment to what you're creating. They get to see that you're
Mm.
locked into it. They get to see your passion. They get to hear your passion. They get to see all of those things. And further it furthers your authenticity to people, to be able to see how committed, because that was one of the things with my publishing journey, is that y'all gonna get, I am locked in. Okay, we are gonna get this. We published during COVID, and we did our printing process overseas, and that was no easy feat. Okay, because we had our the printer facility was shutting down, and the ports were open, then the ports were closed, and then the ports were open, and the ports were closed, and then the books are on a ship, but we don't know where the ship is. And there was so much happening. And I have an illustrator, but now she has COVID, and this is taking way longer than we expected, and we pre-sold the book. So what are we going to do in the meantime? We're going to go along the journey. So from the original concept, before I had my book in hand, because this is another thing, people are so afraid to talk about anything. Like, there is this idea that you got to be quiet because you don't know who's going to be hating and speaking negatively on you. If you don't open up your mouth, open your mouth, open your mouth. There is this thing where people want to just pop out like, no, I'm gonna move in silence. This, I'm gonna be like real mysterious with it, and I'm gonna just pop out and surprise. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. There are celebrities with millions and trillions of followers who will jump as soon as they say jump, and they still have to have a strategy when they're launching something. Okay, so no, we don't move in silence. What? Move in silence? When you're trying to get people to lock into your brand, to lock into your business, to book your services, and you want to move in silence, well, how are we going to hear about your story? How are we going to be invested if you don't want to talk about it? And so, and even being okay with failing publicly. I've
Mhm.
had to be okay with that. Like, I've had to be okay with saying this is coming out on this date, and when the date gets here and it don't happen, being like, okay, guys, now listen, things happen. This is my journey. This is where we are. And so I'm okay with, trying something and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Some people are afraid to try because what if it doesn't work? And what if I have to pivot? When you become a master at pivoting, you're going to see like huge success.
Yeah. You have to be able to pivot. Everybody has to pivot. At some
Always.
point in their life, you have to pivot. And it's not a failure, it's a learning opportunity. And I think we do a disservice when I was always afraid to fail. And I
Hmm.
realized that Apple, Samsung, all of the big ones fail
Oh, yes, they do.
all the time. And they fail publicly. They will push something out and they'll have to retract it because it broke something they didn't expect. So,
Mm.
you get these pushes and then they take it right back and they put you back on the old system because it just didn't work. And we, as just people, we have to get used to that mentality that it's okay.
Yeah,
We're
that was
in
one of
this.
my tips for, I know we're doing 5 tips on creating an unforgettable brand, and one of them was innovate and evolve. Those things
Mm,
are important because when we're doing the branding process, when it comes onto the design, especially the design part of it, people sometimes can get locked into something and they're not willing to pivot, they're not willing to evolve. um and so you have to be willing to do that. So you can try something, you'll try it and you'll see, is this attracting the audience that I want to be, my particular demographic? Is this working for me? And if it's not working for me, being able to pull it back, like you said, reevaluate it, and be able to pivot where you need to pivot, innovate where you need to innovate, and evolve where you need to evolve. Evolution is absolutely important in creating an unforgettable brand.
absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. We have to be able to evolve and innovate.
Absolutely. Because listen, things change. Even on the visual side of it, I tell my clients this all the time. Every year, every season, if you can, if your budget allows, you should be updating your brand photos, but definitely every year. And this is why technology changes, right? The way that we're able to see things, whether in our phone or on our computers or on a television screen, televisions are updating. I have an old TV. It just sent me a message to let me know Netflix will no longer be available on here. You need to update your television. You need a new
Wow.
television. Okay, so I'm thinking it works fine. It looks good. It's relative. It's not that old, but it's telling me that the technology that you need to be able to have these streaming systems, this particular device does not have. And so, what do I need to do? I have to learn how to pivot, evolve, innovate. I need a new television so I can stream on it. And so the same thing with our images, as our phones are updating, iPhone 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. As they're making all of these changes, sometimes the image quality that you had a year ago, your images are going to lose quality in a more updated camera or phone or screen. It won't be as crisp anymore. It won't be as clear anymore. And so you'll need to update. And so we can't get tied to any one thing. You want to be consistent, but don't let that hog tie you. You have to innovate, you have to evolve, you have to pivot.
So, how do you stay? Because we do hear consistency a lot, but how do you stay consistent and innovate and evolve, but maintain some type of consistency?
I think let me go back to my notes. So I think one of the ways to be consistent is to stay true to your core values, right? The core values are going to remain the same even as you're pivoting on some of the other elements of your brand. And so once your core values are still the same, it's going to still have that level of consistency to where people know that this is who you are, this is what your brand represents, even as it starts to evolve and pivot.
I love that. I love that. And I'm always surprised at, and I tell people that are building businesses that if you don't think you have core values, then you will create values without realizing you're creating them.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
who you are at the core is going to come through your business.
It
So if
is.
you don't like some things, then you need to establish some core values that you want to drive within your organization. That's why there's toxic organizations, because their core values were not really laid out in a succinct way. So as they begin to grow, everybody brings their own values in,
They do.
right? And they start to get muddled. And so core values is key. And I love that that is the thing that will keep us consistent in all
Absolutely.
of this.
And it's especially important when you're leading a team of people that you are sure about what your brand or organization core values are, because it's not as simple as just writing them out so that they sound good, but you have to live out those core values in a way that your team, the people who are working with you, the people who are following you, they're able to also say, okay, because that's how my team is. They're like, Sue's not going to like that.
Mhm.
Sue would not do that way. Or, you know what I mean? There's a specific standard we know that she likes for how things is done, and everyone falls in line with that. Not because I tell them that this is how you have to do that, but because they see how I do it. And so they see how I do it, and based on my core values, that's what drives the way that I do the work that I do, and the way that I show up is driven by those core values. So that is really important to have as a brand, is to make sure that you have solidified what the values of your brand is. What are the things that are important to your particular brand, and how it shows up and how it serves.
Absolutely. And I think it's okay if you don't align with somebody's core values, then you know that's just not somebody you want to work with. And it's
Absolutely.
okay, right? I think a lot of times we try to say, "Oh, you need to align with me." No, if you don't align, then just don't work together. How can two walk together least
Unless
they
they
agree?
agree.
Right? And that
Mhm.
means your core values. And it doesn't mean you're bad or you're wrong. It's just the core values of getting things done. And one thing I can say is that when I look at your circle and I look at even contractors and people you deal with,
Mm,
they all operate within your core
right.
values,
Absolutely.
right? And that's so critical to your brand.
It is
So
absolutely critical.
critical.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
absolutely.
That is so, so good. So, what is, just as we get ready to wrap up here, what is one of the absolute biggest challenges that you find in branding?
I think people think that branding is one thing, but it's a lot of different things. And
Hmm.
I think it begins with internal work, that a lot of times when people show up in this space and say, I'm ready, I want to do this thing, I want to create this brand, they're thinking of the very surface things, the visuals, the logo, the color, the photo shoot, and all of those things, but they haven't necessarily done the internal work. They haven't laid a good foundation for their brand with determining their core values, understanding their target audience, understanding who they are as an individual. Um, and because they haven't done that work, when it comes time to do all of the more surface things, we have this barrier of fear that happens with people. And so we can design a beautiful logo and you can take wonderful pictures. And I'm watching and waiting, like, let's see this launch. Like, come on. And nothing. Nothing, because fear kind of grips them and holds them, and we've done all this work and they get to launch and they can't pull the trigger. And so I would say that really it's really important that you do internal work. You look at your own insecurities, because they're going to show up in your brand. The insecurities will show up in your photo shoot real bad, especially that real bad. It's going to show up in how you engage your community, because you'll have people say, I don't like being on camera, I don't like talking, I don't like the sound of my voice. Or if you're writing a blog, or if you're just writing posts, I don't know if my grammar is correct, and I don't know, and I don't. And so you have to do that internal work. You have to be sure of your core. You have to be sure of your audience. You have to be sure of yourself, sure of your gift, sure of your direction before you engage in all of these other things, because then you would just be spending time and money that's just going to end up being wasted because you're not ready.
Right. No, and I can attest to that because initially when I redid my website, I was like, a lot of it for me is more the social media content. We had a sidebar about that, right?
Mhm.
But it's like really putting myself out there. Like now I'm putting myself out there, and while at the time, there were a lot of different facets going on. I wasn't full time operating as an entrepreneur, and there were some contracts and indices and things I had to be mindful of as I was launching. But all of that plays with your psyche too,
It does.
right? Like, oh, I can't do this. And then it becomes a crutch
Mm-hmm.
instead of it being like, no, I can. Like I explored it. There were things that there was no conflict of interest. There was nothing going on. But in my head, right, I had created this safety net.
Yeah.
And so then once I really started launching and doing things, it was like, oh, I can really do this, right? I can really, really do this. So I think that you have to do the internal work and get yourself secure in you
Mm-hmm.
and your target market, all of those things, in order to really be the full package. Because I
Absolutely.
think one thing we don't realize either is now it's one thing for me to have Holly Whaley and it be a brand. It's another that I'm Holly Whaley. I
Right.
am the brand.
Mhm. You are the brand. Yes, you are.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference in that. So we did have one last question. It says, do you have a set of questions to start the internal work to get us to start exploring?
Yes, I think keeping it simple. Who am I? Who am I?
Mm,
What do I do? Who do I do it for? And how do I plan to do it? Just those questions alone, when you're able to answer those questions honestly, those are, and you, they sound easy until you have to like sit, I mean, actually sit down and write that down, write it out. Who am I? Just that alone will have people stumped, because you never really think about it. You know what I mean? Like, you have all of these parts of yourself that you know, and it's compartmentalized. You know that I do this, I do this, but who am I really? And so being able to say who you are, who am I, what is it that I do, who is it that I do it for, and how do I plan to do it? Answering those questions, I think, will help us to get that internal work going, and we'll get to see where the gaps are. We'll get to see where we're not so clear about, you know, who, either we're not clear about who we are, we're not clear about what we do, exactly what we do. Especially for those who are like multipreneurs, or, you know, you're multi-talented, or you have all of these different things that you do that can kind of make you feel scattered. But being able for your brand to really lock into, for this particular brand, what do I do? Who do I do it for, and how do I plan to do it? Answering those questions, I really feel like helps us to build that solid foundation to now we're able to move on to branding.
yeah. I think that's key. And I think you also, if you struggle with that, you need to hire a coach to help you
Mhm.
walk through those and ask you the deeper questions, because sometimes we can even not go deep enough
Right.
with those
Right.
questions,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so when I work with aspiring entrepreneurs, we go through mindset and we
Hmm.
work through some of that, right? But then Susan and I have worked together long enough that she's now coming to me and saying, in your program, can you add this? And I'm like,
Hmm.
yes, we can add that, right? Because we need to make sure that people are really ready. It's
Yes.
not about a cute logo.
Mm-mm.
It really isn't. The foundation is so critical, and it's really not about the cute logo, because you'll never get off the ground.
Right. That's a fact. That's a fact. So I wanted to just like recap top five right
Yes.
before we leave. So number one, define a clear brand identity. Okay, that's where those things come in: your logo, your color palette, the typing. And one thing that people don't think about, your brand voice. How are you going to speak to your audience? Are you going to be on the teaching side? Are you going to use humor? You know what I mean? Are you more in the spiritual side of things? Like, what is your brand voice? Are you speaking as a mentor? Are you speaking as a hey girlfriend? You know, you want to be consistent in your brand voice. So, your brand identity, that's your logo, color palette, the fonts that you use, and your brand source. your brand voice, making sure those things are consistent, because you are communicating a message to people. Even if they don't think they're paying attention, subconsciously they're paying attention. There is a science to color, so it's important. All of those things are important in how we're communicating to people, even subliminally, what our brand is about. Number two, you want to tell a compelling story, which is usually your story. And this is something that you're going to tell over and over and over again. People are drawn to stories. We sit and we watch series for a reason. We are drawn to stories, and there is an art to storytelling. So it's important that we do our research in those things. Like, what is the art to storytelling? How do you open up a story in a way that keeps people locked in until the end? Right? Those things are important. So clear brand identity with your logos, colors, and brand voice. You want to make sure you're telling a compelling story, which means telling your story. Delivering consistent experiences is important. We have a creative HQ. We try to make sure that every time people come in, the experience they have is consistent. The studio is clean. It smells. One of the things that we get a lot is smells so good in here. So people know what to expect when you are consistent. So deliver consistent experiences. And how can you do that? In the way that you engage your audience, in your attention to details. Details are important. Okay, so paying attention to the details and making sure that you put those little detailed touches to the things that we're delivering our clients. So brand identity, logos, colors, brand voice. Tell a compelling story. Tell your story. Delivering consistency in our customer and client experience. Engage with your community. That's another way that we're not just on the sales. You have to engage. Talk to your community. Know what they like. Find places to gather, whether it's a Facebook group or a group outside of social media, on Zoom, sending newsletters, email blasts, however you're going to meet with your community. Make sure that you're engaging with your community. And the last one we talked about first, innovate and evolve. Make sure that your brand is able to stand the test of time, because you're able to pivot, you're able to innovate, and you're able to evolve.
I love it. I'm just writing the second one here. Pivot, innovate, and evolve. I love it.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses didn't make it through COVID because they didn't know how to pivot.
A lot of ministries didn't either, because they also didn't know how to pivot.
They didn't know how to pivot, and that is critical. And
or they wouldn't, because sometimes it's not even the no, is that you're so stuck because you don't want to evolve. You're so stuck to what you've always done, and you're just like, oh, we'll come back around. And then when it doesn't, you realize that you've lost out on and tragedy and things like we went through in 2020. Those are also opportunities for us to be able to serve our audience and our clients in a different way. And so even in the midst of things like calamity that happens, as a business and as a brand, we find ways to show up and serve. And that is how our business is able to survive.
yes, I love that. I absolutely love that. Because if you want to have an authentic brand, you have to make yourself available to people.
Yes.
In all situations. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent, right? We have to show up. And so that's key. So we are at our time, but thank you so much, Susan, for being here. I'm going to throw up how you can connect with her. She does have a website, welcome to smallhouse.com. You can also reach out to book them for any of your branding experiences. If you you're an author and you're ready to publish a book, you want to reach out to her for that as well. You can also send an email to hello@welcometosmallhouse.com. So either way, you can connect with her. I will tell you, get connected. She is on all social media platforms. You will love the work she does because she's consistently telling you her story.
Awesome.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
So I am so excited for what we've been able to share today. And so thank you so much, Susan, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Holly. And thank you to everyone who joined us. Hopefully, something that was said is going to help you show up in your brand authentically and consistently.
Absolutely. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Mind Your Business.